Okay, this is episode 9 of Incoming Aggression. We've reached the final stage. It's the boss of LPL is there again, the final boss, EDG. They're always in the finals. But now a new challenger emerges. A new heir to the throne, if you will. These Chinese players who've never been to an LPL final before. Some Korean players who have been to some domestic finals before, back in their region of Korea. Will they defeat EDG? So before we get to that, we need to talk about how these two teams got to the final. And so the first semi-final was obviously Invictus Gaming play against EDG, and all that drama about, will Pawn play and all that actually sounds to me, I've got to tell you straight up, Froskurinn, immediately, like, I think that whole story about how Ilya was partially bullshit. Like, yeah, I could believe maybe he had some issues and some problems and all that, but the way it was initially told and reported made it sound like he was going to die if he didn't, like, have special emergency attention, and yet now he's just back playing and it looks fine. Like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in general, I've noticed people in Asia seem to have, in terms of health, almost kind of like a hypochondriac relationship with health, where if anything's even slightly wrong, they'll immediately go to a doctor and they immediately like have to get it checked out, and they're really conscious about germs and stuff like that. Like, from being in Korea, people wear those masks all the time if they think anyone's ill. And, it's not actually like they actually are hypochondriacs. It's just that in their culture, I think they're just more concerned about these things, perhaps. Now, maybe there's reasons for that, like environmental reasons, like worse air quality or whatever it might be, that we can take for granted in the West. But what do you think about that whole thing? Because obviously this whole drama of like he would have to be out for 2 months, that doesn't seem to be the case. He played all the games in this semi-final. Didn't look to have anything wrong with him.
No, I definitely think there's actually some sort of cultural argument to be made there. I know that when I spent time in China, they would constantly, with every single meal, they'd have different sets of tea out, and those who could speak English to me would constantly be pushing the tea and be like, oh, drink it, it's healthy for you, or eat this, it's healthy for you, or this will cleanse you. So there's definitely a motif and a theme as far as healthy well-being. So I can see that, with like the mask, and obviously there's huge population over there, so the spread of germs is just that much more significant as well. But as far as like the injury to Pawn, I definitely think there's a case to be made there, especially because of the rigorous activity of sitting and playing a video game. As opposed to, it's not like, they're marathon runners. I mean, when Insect broke his leg, and now it comes out that Insect will never...
Dude, even Insect broke his fucking leg and he's playing the game, so like, come on.
Like, sitting there, and you have to think like Baka, when he broke his arm one-handed and he was playing with that weird brace thing on stage, so... obviously, it's beneficial for EDG to drum up hype like that, and it probably gets magnified by the fans. I have no doubt that there's something wrong with Pawn. He probably doesn't feel very well, but as far as affecting his performance, it didn't appear to do so.
No, I mean, that's a good place to start in terms of this series. Well, obviously, one of the big marquee matchups was going to be in the mid lane, because you have
Pawn.
Rookie, who's obviously an OGN champion, and then you have Pawn. It's not actually an OGN champion, but he's a world's champion, so he's got his own pedigree, But obviously, the interesting thing was, Pawn has the bigger name, but actually Pawn's the guy where people always used to downplay him a bit within his team, because he had such an embarrassment of riches in terms of teammates and incredible players he played with in Samsung White, this is. And Samsung Blue became better when he left. So in a weird way, the story was always set up as though, like, well, we know he's good, but how good really is he? All anyone really knew about how good he was getting to kill Faker and getting to play Faker and have some key performances there. Well, I think in terms of this series, that's like the place you have to start immediately, because it's not like Pawn super dumpstered all the games, but he seemed to get a significant advantage in every matchup he had against Rookie, and in every game he kind of made more of these advantages. What did you think of how the mid lane is matched up overall?
The question that I actually wanted to pose to you before asking this, because obviously my history with Pawn is really limited on a couple of key games that I watched in Korea, and then the World Championship, and then of course Pawn coming over into LPL and bringing this reputation with him. Is that I know that we talk about how Deft is performing better now than he ever did in OGN. I mean, and people were still kind of on the fence last time I talked to them about Pawn's performance, because again, I can't relate his Korean performance as well as I can his Chinese performance. But you, as someone who watches Korea more than I do, would you say that Pawn is performing better in the LPL than he did in OGN?
Yeah, overall, especially if you want to put it in the context of like being a legitimate carry threat and on a regular basis, you know, like in every single game. If in general EDG's nearly always carried by Deft, but if it isn't Deft, then it's definitely Pawn after him, you know, or he's right there as a 1-2 punch with him in that sense. Because the thing was, when he was back on blue, the problem was they weren't a good enough team at the time. Like, they were never actually going to make the semis or win an OGN. So as a result, if he had one good performance, it just looked like that classic thing of like, okay, a really good rookie player, but the team isn't good enough, so you can't really know if he's just doing that well because his team's total shit and he's the only thing that stands out. And then the problem he had was when he then got moved over to Samsung White, it was the exact opposite scenario where he's playing with all these godlike legendary players who we know how good they are, and they all dominate their specific areas of the game to the extent that he would still have some really crazy games, but it wasn't even necessary, you know. Instead he was more like the guy where they could win even without him doing anything. So then if he had like the 1-in-4 really big games, it just put them totally over the top, and at that point they were just unbeatable, you know, because if you've already got a super winning bot lane, a godlike jungler going everywhere on the map, top always goes even, then if the mid laner gets any advantage or a good matchup for him in this particular game, because that's another thing he had in Samsung White, is there's going to be times where there's an extra ban that would be open, where if he was on a worse team, he's going to have 2 bans against him, where he might only have 1 against him now, you know. So there was definite benefits to being on Samsung White, and he never was required to carry all the time, and so he would occasionally, but it wasn't like a consistent theme. And as much as he was brilliant when he was against certain people like Faker, like he actually consistently did well against Faker, the weird thing was he was almost in like a Jin Air this season situation where, yeah, against Faker he would do well and even win sometimes, but then what people always conveniently don't mention is against some of the mids who aren't Faker, someone like a Goong or some of these sorts of people, sometimes he could actually be not as amazing, you know. So some of them kind of he wasn't as great, so that's why he never really was like, he wasn't better than Faker, put it that way. So okay. In this team I do think you could say he's better, and I won't say like it looks like his skill levels increased or anything, or we've learned something special about him that we didn't know was before. It's more like now he has to carry a lot more and he has to be that consistent threat as like at least the second threat on the team, and so as a result he's shown that he can do that, and that it's not just that he had the godlike players and that allowed him to do that. And so I think he has shown a bit more overall, and it's more like he's had more opportunity to be a really good player. Now he's like entering the territory of being like a legitimately great player in his own right, you know, especially obviously if he could win an LPL title.
Well, he's definitely also given the resources. So EDG recognized that Pawn is, like you said, their secondary carry. Because if you think about how they're working as a team right now, even in the IG series, a lot of it was Clear Love Pawn doing their own thing, or making sure that they were skirmishing together. So,
you know something I liked, Froskurinn? Little callback to last week's episode. So in that game where Pawn was playing on LeBlanc, and he was against,
I think.
Let me think.
Yeah, Rookie played Azir.
Yeah, he was playing against Azir, and he was on LeBlanc, okay. And obviously, Rookie himself is a LeBlanc player, so you'd think Rookie would have a really good sense of the matchup and whatnot. One of the things, aside from the fact that actually Pawn did get some solo kills, he also got some kills as a result of ganks. Now, you're thinking to yourself, great, you're setting it up here, Thorin. You got ganks, therefore it must have been the wonderful Clear Love. 100% kill participation. He must have been there. No, it was the top laner. The top laner would roam down and then perform a gank. And actually, I would think to myself, where's the jungler? I didn't notice. He was invisible in some senses, you know. He's playing it. He really is the classic Evelyn player. So, yeah, where was he in that? Where was he in those? It's a fucking... The top laner was the one roaming down on Hecarim.
To be fair, Clear Love was playing Nunu, and Nunu's not known as like the best ganking champion, especially on Azir, because the lane is so short that Azir can just what is his little... It's like his flag and drag, his sand soldier escape. So, I mean, there wasn't a ton of viable options as far as Nunu.
I thought it was a key play initially because it got that lane snowballing, and then it's just worth mentioning. It's just interesting, you know.
But it does speak to Pawn's proficiency and likewise the new role that he's really taken apart. They've always been a skirmish-based team. Like in the very beginning, EDG, they were trying to do 5v5ing, and it just wasn't working because they were trying to use Pawn how you would be used, but it just not the same player at all. So they started doing more skirmish, more Samsung White-esque types of fights, and now we've come to this point in EDG's career where like pretty much Kelsey always likes to call them the Chinese mafia. So you have Koro, Mako, and Clearlove, and they're all really big roamers. Like when EDG are performing at their best, it's because these three players are constantly roaming around their two Korean pieces, Deft and Pawn. And Deft's now sufficient enough that he can be left in a lane, like given an advantage, and he can 2v1 just fine and like survive and CS. But like anytime there's pressure on Pawn or Pawn's doing something, 9 times out of 10, one of those Chinese Mafia, if not all three of them, are going to come out of the woodwork and get an advantage for Pawn. And then once you give Pawn an advantage, it's not like they need to babysit him or, like I say, hold his dick for him. The excellent thing about Pawn is that he'll then take that advantage and he'll beat your mid laner every single time. And once he pushes you out of lane, he's going to kill you or he's going to force you out. He's going to immediately run into the enemy jungle and he's just going to sit in a bush and wait for your jungler to come across and just blow him up, which is why champions like LeBlanc are so dangerous to give to him. That said, Deft was the real carry of game 2, but just as a general oversight of Pawn's style and how he's working with EDG, I think is fairly impressive.
I mean, another thing that was interesting about the Pawn rookie matchup is that I think I'm right here. I think they both played different champions in all 3 games.
They played different champions for all 3.
Which is kind of strange because you'd think one of them at least would stick with something, because it's not like everything's getting target banned out. So it's kind of unusual in that sense. But as a result, that was also kind of like an impressive factor for Pawn that he was consistently good on all these different champions, Yeah,
and he played different style of champions too. I think he played Fizz, LeBlanc, and Orianna. So I mean, like you have those 2 assassin champions, but you also had a control champion.
No, he played Kassadin.
Was it Kassadin?
Yeah, it was the other way around. It was Rookie who played Orianna in the last game.
Okay, so no, this is interesting then, as I look at it. Okay, so Pawn's playing Assassins every single time, and Rookie played Azir and Ori for 2 games, which are like big AoE zone control champions, which, I mean, Rookie has a fantastic Azir. It's normally banned against him or trying to contest, but didn't pay off.
I mean, the thing is, to play into the whole... Well, the reputation that Pawn has, he's like the faker kryptonite, like he's a guy who's solo kill faker. Mm-hmm. We can see in these games, he clearly does have like a fantastic sense for when a solo kill is even possible, because, I mean, LeBlanc is like the ultimate champion for that. Like LeBlanc and Zed, really, because the guys who really know like the ranges of those abilities and like how the other guy can move back, they're the ones who are like, They can always find that little gap where the other mid laner thinks he's like close enough to the tower to be safe, but they know he isn't. And then if he makes the 1 step forwards, they go in on him, And actually, Pawn was phenomenal at getting the 1 or 2 extra kills out of the lane that otherwise a normal person watching it wouldn't necessarily think was even possible,
Pawn played it perfectly. That said, I mean, LeBlanc is a good pick into Azir. Like she's one of the few champions, like you said, with Zed that can get on top of him and really punish. It's so weird to talk about this series because I feel like the first half of this series was awesome. Like there was better objective control, frankly, from Invictus Gaming. However, it didn't translate into wins just because of Baron. Like their Dragon objective control was far superior.
Hold up right there. Okay, so listen, game 1. Game 1 was probably the best game. Game 1 was probably the best game of the series. It was a good game. It was quite back and forwards for the first sort of 20 minutes. But when you start saying that, you've already gotten back onto your old IG bandwagon there, which is that IG, the thing with IG is, right, not only do they have really skilled players, but they're also, they've got that right mix of like smartness and like intelligence and reading the game. And then you talk about objective control, I've immediately got to bring you up on this point here. Did Invictus Gaming not in fact trade the Baron for a Dragon, which then made it impossible to hold the game at that point? You remember that play?
I wasn't gonna jump on the bandwagon.
You remember that?
Okay.
Tell me about that intelligent trade. They can take the Baron right now, so they'll have super minions coming our base. How are we going to defend these towers? Oh, we can't. Just take the Dragon anyway, fuck it. That's one of the all-time great trades right there for Froskurinn.
I was just saying that their Dragon control was superior. And it wasn't, obviously, like, there were major plays that caused issues, and the Baron play was really where EDG snowballed ahead and won that game. Like, definitively. Of course, there were like little things, like you said, Pawn finding advantages in lanes, things like that. But the Baron play was awful. As far as IG though, on a whole, like you said, game 1 was really good. Game 2, like, and this is what's awkward about watching this series. I didn't watch it live. I had to go back and redo the VODs. And I was talking to Drex and Kelsey, Raz, people like that. And it was bizarre. It was like, IG just gave up. I was like, what? IG just gave up? I can't see that. I can see them going hard in the paint. But when you're watching game 2, because it's the shortest game of the series, about halfway through, they they just start doing ridiculous, stupid things. And then game 3, you immediately have like that pick ban phase where they lock in the Yasuo. And I don't know if Yasuo is like rookie's signature champion, but that champion has no place in the meta right now, and that was an awful pick.
Well, what was confusing to me is that when I think of how IG played this series overall, because what's funny is their play in general was quite similar in all 3 games. In fact, what's funny is both teams played all 3 games out a similar kind of tempo. They had advantages in the same parts of the game. It always felt like after the first, say, like 8 to 10 minutes, IG just made no plays at that point in time. Like as soon as it got to the point where they had got a couple of kills behind, they never made any like desperation plays, or they never like forced some big. It's like they let themselves get choked out slowly, and they just let EDG just add the little advantage into a bigger advantage, and then it's like EDG always picked the good team fight for them, and then I don't know what IG's like. If I had to guess, I would say IG as a team choked. Looked more like that to me. Not choking as in like Link style where you totally misplay the champion and miss your ultimates and you lose, you die, that's obvious choking. I mean the type of choking where it's like you're so nervous you don't want to make a play because you don't want to make the wrong play, and so instead you just kind of hold and you hope something good's going to happen. But if everyone on the team's doing that, then probably nothing good is going to happen. Whereas when you're behind, unless you really are that much smarter than the other team, you usually have to make some sort of a decisive play. Like if you're behind and you can see the trajectory ahead of you, it's like, right, they're this much gold ahead of us and they're this many items and this player's a little bit more fed. Well, at some point in time, you have to sort of plan for what your move is to get back in the game. Like, okay, well, I can't do anything now, but maybe in 5 minutes, if I could force a fight in this part of the map, then even if I lose, I can take this object. Whatever it is, you have to have a plan in mind. I bet if you sat IG down at any of those moments, like in real time, and said, like, "What are you thinking now?" I'm not sure they even had a really good plan at any of those moments. Like that's why I brought up earlier. Like, if you just watch this series alone, you'd wonder what you were talking about when you were saying about all the
counter
smartness
and
they're so smart. Like, what do you think on this?
No, I definitely think that's a fair, but it's not just IG though who kind of suffer from this problem, like this anxiety, like lead anxiety. I think King is also a primary, what's what I'm looking for, offender of this. And like when you. So things that bystanders have to understand when they're watching the games, because when I'm watching games like on Twitter or whatever, I get a lot of feedback. It's like, oh, these games are so sloppy. What the fuck is going on in LPL? Like, how can you stand to watch this? Or even just like LCS in general, like when games happen. Like the difference is as a bystander, we have the scoreboard available to us. So like when we're watching a game, be it CLG versus TSM or IG versus EDG, we can tell like how far ahead the teams are. We can say like, oh, CLG has a 7k gold lead. Why aren't they doing anything? Why are they stagnant? But obviously, like the players, they don't have this information, and it's actually very hard for players, like when talking with them, to like diagnose how far ahead they are. And so I don't know if this is just a consistent problem with IG, or I don't know. It's hard to. This game, first game was awesome. The rest of the games, no, they didn't play their counter strategy style. They didn't have great draft phase. In the Vici gaming game, because I'm trying to find like trends coming into this, they did a little bit more rotation focus, and obviously, like you pointed out, that awful rotation trade on like the Baron for the Dragon. So I don't know if maybe they were trying different styles, or maybe this was something that they saved for playoffs. They're trying to do more rotation-based game, and it just didn't pay off because they didn't have the execution prepared for it, or they weren't ready to commit and pull the trigger on it. It's really weird talking about IG though in terms of not willing to pull a trigger and commit to a play. Just because of like historically, especially now, even though it's only half the IG that it was with like Zatai, Kid, and Kitties, you're still, taking the KT arrows and jamming it into that, and you don't have like any aggression or any willingness to commit. I don't know. It was disappointing. I'm disappointed.
But I mean, even if you just took if you had the strengths of the teams written down on paper, and we take the thing that you said there about how those EDG players, not only just separately, but even as a unit, will roam around the map together, and they'll, as a result, you won't just find one on their own.
You'll find
you'd think that IG, that's a way to make a decisive play to get back in the game. Group up, wait in a brush somewhere, or try and wait until there's an area of the map you don't have warded off and someone's missing from the lane. Try and go there, force a fight, a skirmish in the jungle somewhere. That's, in theory, that's like a strength of Kakao. He's a very strong jungler mechanically. It didn't really feel like they ever did this though. It felt like it was always them who got caught. Like they'd walk into a brush, there'd be someone waiting there. They're the ones who were always they were always the reactive ones. IG,
Yeah, but I mean, a big issue was that their side lane. Well, mid lane was not having a fun time, and Rookie is a big key component of their strength. And so when he's put down, IG will lose a lot of their power. Thankfully, over the season, Kid and Kitties have been pretty standard and pretty consistent and strong. One of the stronger bot lanes, probably, as far as a 2v2. I think, obviously, a very overlooked one. I've always been a fan of Kid and Kitties, and they played the throw the cannon and things like that with like Callista cannon combos. But they're facing it off against Deft, and Deft all 3 games performed amazingly well. So you lost like your strength there, or you at least went even, or you fell behind. So if you've already lost your pressure in the mid lane, and then your bot lane is either just even or slightly behind, and then you're relying on Zatai versus Koro, and he's just getting more successful roams. Like, I can see why IG would lose their pressure and lose their ability to set up vision-based picks, especially because the champions that you're really counting on to make picks like that or to help you with your skirmish, like Azir, Orianna, are not those types of champions. You need what Pawn was playing: LeBlanc, Fizz, Kassadin.
The thing is, though, Deft obviously was like okay, Pawn had the mid lane. He had the early plays. Okay, he was getting the solo kills in lane. He was outplaying the other guy in terms of just matchup. But obviously, Deft did carry the team fights as we expect.
Oh yeah.
The only problem is when I see Deft playing the way he played in this series here, it's like they're taunting me because it just looks like Name playing. Like even the champions he's playing, the way he plays it, he plays exactly the same way. Like what he has in terms of the team fight timing. Obviously, totally different champions, but actually, this is something that in Europe, what impressed me about Forgiven when he was having his breakout season this time in Europe when he was playing with SK. It's like the timing on when to like step out of the fight for a second to like draw the enemy in to chase you, and you kite back off them while your team actually attack them. And then the other way, when people are fighting your teammates, that's when you go in. But the problem is if you miss time that one, if you miss time going in like that. If you're not that great a player, you just get popped instantly. Like they just get on you, the CC gets it, and you're dead at that point in time. That's the thing. Like Name was like the god at knowing how to do. Like they're moving in and out of the fight, and Deft is like he just looks like a replica of it when you see him play with an EDG. It feels like they have the same exact role for him and everything. They're like, oh, I think we know how this works. Let's play that out again.
I mean, this was what we said from the very beginning as far as picking up Deft for Name. It was like they're interchangeable pieces, but why would you take Deft? Because you're effectively bringing on a language barrier. But to be frank, Deft he's playing amazing. He's playing better than Name did, at least this season. Probably the height of his career. He looks fantastic on more
everything.
Picks. Yeah, pretty much every single champion that he's played has looked amazing. I know. Okay, again, to my understanding, as far as Korea is concerned, that Deft was like between Imp and Deft, Imp was like the auto attack based carry, and then Deft, known for like his Corki and his Kog'Maw, was like the skill shot based carry. So to see him perform really well on champions like Jinx, which obviously fit into his general playstyle of being that hyper late carry, about being more about the team fights, but the fact that she's still like an auto-based champion versus like an AD caster, and that he's not making full use of his fantastic skill shot hitting, I think is pretty remarkable.
I mean, in this series as well, I mean, I'll just do this. I'll say it jokingly, but there's a serious piece of analysis behind it. Like, it just gives me a chance to throw in a little jab about FCZF because, I mean, yeah, well, clearly he was a huge part of EDG's success in the past because he just disappeared
underrated, yes.
And no one's even noticed because actually, here's what's great. The Mako guy came in and also no one's even noticed. Like, I'm pretty sure some people in the West who haven't watched the games aren't even aware that Mako actually plays for their team. And if you watch the games, you also wouldn't be aware because he doesn't do any godlike plays. He's another... Okay, you know they have the phrase, Froskurinn, lane bully for AD carries who are like Forgiven, they're like Uzi, and they have to dominate the lane, they have to be like in people's faces all the time, trading like every CS, you either give them the CS or they trade for an auto. Like I have a term that I used to use in the past for Lust Boy when he used to have to work with Captain Jack, but when I talk about them, I call them like lane bouncers, okay? Because they're the mad life, they're the Lost Boy, they're the strong support who has to keep a weak AD carry. They have to protect him, so they're kind of like the bouncer who keeps like the rough elements off him, you know. But when you're talking about a support where he's like just literally a support, like he's there with a really strong AD carry, but his job is just to do whatever that guy says and just to like follow him around the map, be there. Just put abilities onto him, disengage everything. He literally just is this guy's bitch. He's like a lane butler. That's what I call him, a lane butler. That's the terminology, okay? Mako is a fucking lane butler, dude. And as far as I can tell, FCZF is like the all-time lane butler in history.
Mako is so good. I have no idea why he's so underrated. I think he's top 3 of the supports in LPL for sure right now.
Okay.
I think
what does that? Wait. What does that mean? Who are the top 3 supports in LPL?
I would think PYL, Mako, and probably I really like Zero still, even though Starhorn Royal Cup got relegated, just because Zero had a phenomenal performance, whether his team won or lost, and when they did win, it was on his back.
Think about the series they won, where he just like went ham on that fucking Kennen and just owned everyone.
Or when he plays Nautilus, and like he'll, what would he do? He would get ahead, Name bottom, and then he'd immediately back and like run mid, and he'd stand back in Fog of War, and then he'd just walk forward to get like a double kill because the enemy jungler would show up, and it'd be like the support mid laner just taking him on. And people will say like, what about Mata? But just to be like frank, Mata is very displeased with his team, or at least he looks very displeased with his team, and he's not having the same type of performance as far as like affecting the map. Mako is like he's like a mini PYL. He's very big on the roam, and like you said, like making sure that all the vision is set up for Deft, making sure that he's protected. He played Janna 2 times. I think he was probably one of the only, Clear Love played Rek'Sai
he's confirmed
back-to-back.
basic as fuck, okay.
Basic as fuck. No, but he played Nautilus, he played Janna, he plays those supportive-esque junglers, but he has shown that he can do like the playmakers like Thresh and do like the Mad Life plays, but majority of the time he plays Janna, and he roams a lot. And his big thing is applying vision, and his big thing is anytime Clear Love's like on the bottom side of the map, Mako will go up to him. And like those two, it's like a drive-by. They like gank Deft's lane real quick, and then he like takes Mako with him while Deft is able to just freeform the lane without any sort of pressure and take his lead. And then they'll go and put that either into deep vision or they'll gank mid or something like that. But he's a big roam support, probably even more than PYL.
So why do teams not just wait until those players leave and then gangbang the bot lane?
Because they're dead. They'll kill the enemy team. I mean, there's been times where they've, people have tried to catch out Clear Love and Mako and Deft when they're on the bottom side of the map. This was probably mid-season for EDG, and there'd be like a little skirmish over the enemy blue buffer around the Dragon Pit, but then it just comes to outplay potential. And that you're fighting, and I know you're gonna like roll your eyes at this, but you're fighting Clear Love in a team fight. And like Clear Love, he may not be the best jungler, but you'll be hard-pressed to find a better team fighter than Clear Love.
So you just put a statement out like that. You mean of junglers? You have to add the part of junglers at the end of that.
Of junglers.
Oh, be hard pressed, will I, in history to find a better team fighter than Clear Love? Oh, will I? I wonder if on his own team I could find any. Nah, he's clearly the best. Remember to add the context, my love. You have to put of junglers at the end. Then it makes sense as a statement. Okay.
You're trying to early skirmish / like mini team fight Deft and Clear Love with Mako, and Mako's typically on Janna, so he's going to give a surplus of AD to Deft as well as provide amazing disengage. So it's not surprising that in those 3v3s that most of the time EDG is going to come out on top.
So you're putting Mako above Cloud?
Yes.
Hater. Why are you hating?
Cloud did not play well at all. Like even out of OMG, even Cloud has been very hit and miss. His champion pool is limited. And I mean, obviously Thresh is always going to be a strong champion, and he played Janna well for the few times that we saw it, including like the World Championship. But Cloud has been unable to transition into like the new meta of like these Nautilus supports and things like that, or the Kennen support. And true, Mako hasn't shown a ton of that, but Mako's performance has been felt and is synergizing much better with the team as far as his roam, whereas like Cloud will just leave at random times. I don't know if there's like, I can imagine that there's probably some hardship between Cloud and Uzi, and Uzi wanting to maintain him and keep him in the lane.
In terms of EDG coming into this final now, like the round of 8 match that they had is really actually didn't really tell us a whole lot because of the fact that 4 of the games weren't with the lineup that they're using now. So it's hard to really take a whole lot from the games that they had to use you. So I kind of mentally dismissed those. So from what we have seen so far, we've seen 4 games of them with their real lineup. We've seen the 3 in the semi-final. We've seen the 5th game of the round of 8.
Mm-hmm.
Is this still the EDG that was like the dominant force in the regular split, and they should be a big favorite for the final?
I wouldn't say a big favorite. I think it's very clear that they've lost practice time. If that comes down to Pawn's treatment, I know that that's what they say, is that he's still being treated, or if his discomforts do long hour scrims, or maybe the schedule got messed up, but they're not as refined as they used to be. And this is kind of the big talking point going into this. If EDG were playing how they were in the regular season, this would be very heavily EDG favored. Like, they looked amazing. If you guys haven't seen EDG games during the regular season, they look fantastic. It's awesome. Clearlove has been consistently at like his highest point for probably the longest amount of time for his career. Like, normally he goes on these dips.
Surely not.
Surely not. But the difference is, and the issue why a lot of us are kind of like pausing and just really questioning who's going to win, is that LGD looks fantastic. They look seamless, flawless. I mean, it was probably the most dominating performance as far as the playoffs are considered. And EDG, yeah, they still look okay, but they don't look as dominant as they did. And so if both teams are playing to their season standard, EDG would win this hands down. But with this new playoff style of EDG, whether this is Pawn or some other internal or external factor, or maybe LGD just sandbag that hard.
Froskurinn, please. You're telling me that EDG, who just clean swept your beloved Invictus Gaming, like they weren't even worthy to be in a semi-final. It's like, they're not really playing that well, you know. I can't really say that they're dominant or anything. Like, what more did you want them to do? I
don't know what I expected from IG. I was actually really disappointed on the IG and VG Gaming games, to be frank and to be honest. I felt like that, and a lot of people were hailing that set as like the big set to watch from the playoffs. Like, oh, this is so good. And even I hyped it up before it happened. Like, this is going to be the set that's probably going to be the most exciting to watch. But VG played like crap. They didn't play to their own style. In my personal opinion, they didn't play to their strengths. And IG, yeah, they played better in team fights, but they still made a lot of consistent mistakes. And I'm one of those people who, yeah, I love the Chinese season, so I love the blood and the gore and the aggressive, like, 5v5 big. But I would still rather a team play a team fight correctly. Like, win because they're the better team, not because the other team made more mistakes. And I think that's an important distinction. And right now, IG are not playing or not winning because they're the better team. They won and they made it this far because Vici made more mistakes than them. And that's, like, pretty disappointing when you're supposed to be a top team in an elite region.
So then if we go to the other side of the bracket, so we actually already discussed when OMG played against LGD in the last episode. Mm-hmm. So in the semi-finals, the story here was obviously LGD in a weird way got a boost in rep, even though they finished 6th place or whatever it was, just because they've beaten OMG, and OMG were thought to be the potential contender. They had the bracket where they should be going to the final. So LGD beats them in convincing form. So now LGD has sort of like the hype around them. But still, Snake is like in the semi-finals and people are like, is it for real? How was this one so one-sided? Because it's not like LGD were the powerhouse before, you know.
It's everything we said about Snake came true. It just... For the entire season, the one thing that probably was the most honest thing that we said about Snake, because yes, there was a vendetta against Snake just because they were overhyped and we were trying to cool that off. Snake were playing to their ceiling every single game of the season. They tried as hard as they possibly could every single time. We saw exactly where Snake were. We knew what their ceiling was. We knew what their weak points were. And so this is the primary difference. So yeah, did that do them fantastic in the standings? Of course it did. But you have to understand, LGD were blatantly sandbagging. Of course they had their whole strategy where, you know, they're swapping Acorn and Flame. What are they going to do? But towards the end of the season, they were locking in like ridiculous picks. And the mystery and the thing that we were counting on is we don't realize where these like EDG, OMG, LG, and of course we were wrong about OMG, but we didn't know where these top end teams ceilings were going to be, but we knew where Snakes were. So if Snake is here and LGD and OMG, like all these other teams are like here or here, but we know that there's like this other gap that they're about to close, then that just means bad news bears for Snake when it comes to games that actually matter, which are the playoffs. And that's effectively exactly what happened to Snake. They tried to play their game, and because everyone already knew what it was, because they've been giving it all season, LGD just locked in AoE compositions, which was brilliant because they knew that Snake were going to try to fight them. So why not just stack AoE wombo combos and watch what happens?
But remember though, Froskurinn, remember, when you talk about LGD, you can never get over how shit the jungler is and how he's always going to be showing up by every matchup. Well, every round he goes against these star junglers, these guys who legends, rising stars, and every round doesn't seem to matter. How is this? How is Schwen surviving in a world of hard knock jungling?
There's two things that were really important to this. The first and foremost is the meta shift and the type of junglers that shifted over. And initially, I put this as a dock against Chwin just because he had shown success on Vi, and that was pretty much it. And Vi was going to get a big nerf. But obviously, with the rise of picks like Nunu, which have been very powerful for him, Nunu is an incredibly safe jungler. It's very hard to punish Nunu, even when he goes in and he counter jungles. And it's also he's a herbivore style jungler, so he's not a playmaking jungler, he's a play finisher jungler. He's just there to be that utility piece. So that's also a really good role to have Chwin on, to not rely on your jungler to make the plays for you, especially the weakest member of your team. But then the other aspect that really played into covering Chwin's weaknesses was the lane swap. So every single game this series, LGD lane swapped. And what's potent about the lane swap is that by moving your advantage over to the top side of the map, you pretty much protect your jungler. And it's actually a really key strategy. A lot of people think about the lane swap as far as in terms of like the top laner and the AD carry, whether you're trying to put a top laner down because you're getting a CS discrepancy, or you maybe have like a hyper scale AD carry that you want to protect. But even with Graves, they would lane swap it. And it just makes sense to protect your jungler, because obviously the enemy jungler and the enemy team can't run in and fuck with your jungler, who's your weakest member, if they're at a numbers disadvantage on the side of the map. So it pretty much secures early game for Chwin, which I thought was really brilliant.
Does the fact that in another series Chwin did absolutely fine, had in good moments, does that make you question his opposite number, as it were? I mean, Beast in theory has been one of the guys who's been highly touted this season. He's supposedly one of the stars. In fact, you yourself tried to champion him as a way of backhandedly putting down Crystal. So where was your champion, Froskurinn?
Beast, I still think is a better jungler than Chwin. I just think that Chwin's weaknesses are compensated, and then he's shouldered and flanked by these amazing teammates that really catered to him. It's weird to say cater to him because of what Chwin's role is playing within the team. He's still laying down the vision and doing a bit more of the roams. But, I mean, his team has definitely developed a style. Like, the jungler is always going to be priority pick right now just because they're so strong. But the fact that they're prioritizing Nunu versus Gragas when Gragas is clearly the stronger jungler, even if you think about that 1v1 matchup, Gragas is able to displace Nunu's ultimate with, like, the cask. He offers a bit more versatility, but yet they're still prioritizing, we need to get Chwin Nunu. We need to lane swap, even when we have a Graves, to protect our jungler. We're roaming together and sending Acorn and Flame to roam and be alongside Chwin. Like, those are the kind of the 2v2 that's happening. So I don't think Beast lost because he's a worse jungler than Chwin. I think Beast lost because he has a far weaker team than LGD, like across the board, just every single member.
Across the board, right. Well, that brings up another point I definitely wanted to get to with Froskurinn. So one of the reasons why the end of the season, the end of a split, the playoff portion, is one of my favourite periods of time is not just the fact that, you know, I much prefer bracket play and I much prefer like the time when everything matters and there's no excuses, but I also really love watching all these bandwagons crashing off cliffs and going down in flames and the wheels falling off them and suddenly people leaping out of them like rats off a sinking ship. And what's funny is people would think it's the other way around. They think, no, but that means some of the bandwagons work out, right? Some of them get to the finish line. Thorin gets to the finish line. Unicorns of Love get there. You know, people are making it to the finish line. Some of these Hiller Sang makes it there. But I don't mind one or two of them getting through. It's getting to see the devastation that is wrought when all those other bandwagons, the vast majority, crash, burn, get destroyed, make people literally have to delete their own existence off Reddit and pretend that their own life was in fact an imagination of someone else when it really happened, Froskurinn. It really happened. So, speaking of which, when you start telling me in rewriting history that, like, oh, you see, across the board, you know, man for man, the team of Snake was just worse. I have to just stop you right there because, listen, you know the order I like to go in on the map. We're starting at the top lane, okay? So starting at the top lane, what player plays for Snake Gaming? It's Flandre. Flandre, who the bandwagon was so hard for this guy that people were calling him the best top laner in LPL. People were saying he was as good as some of the people were comparing him to, like, for example, Smeb and Duke in Korea. They were saying like he's on this level. And remember what his key champion pick was for Froskurinn? You remember it? I'm sure you know.
Fizz?
What was it? Rumble. Wasn't he the god of Rumble?
He played a ton of Rumble, but coming in, his big his actual strategy and what he's really well known for is his Fizz top.
But he was a strong Rumble player, right? You remember? In fact, he played against LGD earlier in the season, and his Rumble was one of the reasons why he was an impressive player. Okay. Now in this series, The boy Flandre was here. It was his chance. He was facing the legends. He was facing Acorn, formerly known as something like Chunju or some shit. He was facing Flame. He got to play on his Rumble. The stage was set. Now all we need is the actors to come forwards and say their lines. He fumbled his lines. He looked like an amateur actor. Frankly, he was an understudy in many... What do you think? Come on, man. Give me the lowdown. What happened in the top lane here? Where was this star? Where was the rising star for Froskurinn?
To be really fair to Flandre, he is not better than Acorn and Flame. I would say that Acorn and Flame are probably the top laners. Like, probably Acorn, Flame, and Koro are probably the top 3 top laners in LPL right now. And so Flandre, even before he even touches those, he still has to go through plenty. I'm not going to invoke his name, although you know who I'm talking about.
Zitai?
Yeah. But
yeah. I'm connected. I collect all these opinions, don't worry.
The other issue is that he's really, really young. And I know that I use that as an excuse, and it shouldn't be an excuse, but he's like Snake or really young. And Flandre, I think, is the youngest player on that team. So consistency is probably one of the #1 problems that I see with super young players in China.
When you say super young, do you mean he's another one of those players who... In terms of the official paperwork, it would say he's like 17. But if I'd actually stood next to him,
have you looked at him?
Since he was born, I would only have been standing next to him since 14 years ago. You know, is it one of those scenarios? Do you think?
Probably.
Okay,
I think he's supposed to be 15.
See the clever legal way that I phrased that freaking hypothetical there? Okay. So, but he is very young in this sense.
Yeah, and so you have to think, like, the issue with the young players is it's always going to be consistency and decision-making, and they make really stupid choices sometimes, which, I mean, makes sense. Think about when you were in middle school, the stupid shit that you did that you thought was brilliant, as opposed... they don't have
I was never in middle school, Froskurinn. That's an American thing. Like, I was at secondary school.
Okay.
I was attending, you know, I was ages 12 to 16, and, you know, I know that young guys, you know, they get overexcited where the pressure's on them. Sometimes they have performance anxiety, I believe you're referring to here. Whereas that's why, you know, a tip for the women out there, you know, that's why you go with a veteran guy, an established guy, a guy where you can see his confidence isn't just put on, it isn't fake. It comes from a place where he knows what he's capable of. He knows if he just gets a shot, he's going hard in the paint. He's going to the rim to throw one down with authority, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, so speaking of Acorn and Flame versus Flandre, continue.
Oh my god, these visuals are so bad right now. And he's competing against not just like the best top laners in LPL, but some of the best top laners in the world who have shown that through a track record. So do I blame Flandre for not having an amazing performance? No, not really, especially because he was target banned a couple of the games, like his Trundle being taken away, which he'd had a good performance on. But even when he got the champion, then it still didn't really make up for anything. But yeah, I mean...
Okay, Froskurinn, remember what you just said there. You know, you can't blame him for his performances. Okay. Young guy, it's first play. So now here's the problem. If you can't blame people who are young guys the first time performing, let's talk about Crystal. So you thought it was going to be your moment to shine, but you've just stolen your own thunder away there. You've pulled out the ground from beneath you from which you needed to stand to get onto that very high horse.
Oh, and now I can't take Crystal down. Okay.
No, tell me, what did you think of Crystal in the series overall?
Actually, he didn't. Okay, his first game was decent. I think he played Severe the first game, and he didn't really do anything, but he didn't like blatantly feed and just not participate in team fights. It was actually on his Draven that I was like, oh yeah,
you were liking that.
Yeah, when he pulls out the Draven, he gets the lane swap, he gets the initial itemization where he's got the early kill, he's going in, he's like 1-0-0, he's got his Bloodthirster, he's ready to fight, and then he just gets dunked. Yeah, watching Crystal fail was a highlight. And again, people think that I hate Crystal. I don't hate Crystal. I hate Crystal because they love Crystal, and they overlove Crystal.
See, your problem, Froskurinn, isn't the things you think. It's not even what you're actually saying. It's that you're not the most eloquent person, okay? Like, to say a sentence like, I don't hate Crystal, I just hate Crystal. Like, you see where there's problems in terms of like the subtlety of what you're saying. There's an element of nuance there that you haven't quite developed there. I think what you mean is you don't hate Crystal, you just greatly dislike the way he is perceived by other people.
Yeah, that's a fair way to say it. Because
Okay.
Crystal's he's not the worst AD carry in LPL. He's probably a mid-tier ADC. It's not his fault that he's competing in a region that now has the best AD carries in the world in it. Like, the ceiling has just gotten that. And I feel like I give this argument to Crystal every single time, but people need to stop overhyping this guy. He is not Uzi. He is not Deft, and he is very clearly not Imp.
Well, luckily, I believe people now will stop overhyping him for at least a few months. In fact, like I say again, you know all those people, Froskurinn, that the people. I always talk about those people because those, first of all, they're not famous people, so you won't remember them. But they no longer exist. You have to realize these people who were fans of these people and who bandwagoned them, they not only don't exist now, they literally unexist. Like, they never did exist. Like, you will never find one. You will never meet. It's like someone who was a member of the Nazi Party or something. If you ever meet them again in the future, they're never going to admit they were a member of the Nazi Party, that they were involved in it in any way. They're going to be like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I was a farmer in this period, and I moved out of Germany to South America for, reasons, immigration reasons, to visit, see the rest of the world. Like, you'll never find someone now who said that Crystal was like top 2 AD carry in China, or he's better than Imp, or whatever they said. Those people now no longer exist, which is ideal because I always thought they never should have existed. So to me, I'm just happy to let them go, okay? I'm happy to let them jettison that persona, get a new throwaway account on Reddit, and start working on some new retarded opinions.
But this is why I love the LGD versus Snake series. Not only because it gives you that high horse to like put Crystal like under a magnifying glass and be like, this is exactly what we were talking about. But what I was talking about before with IG and Vici, how that was a game where two teams were just playing awful and one team just played it worse than the other team. And that's what led to that victory of IG even moving on. The LGD, and what's been really exciting about LGD, is they're consistently just playing better. Like there's very few, if any, real glaring issues with LGD's performance. Like, they seem to have fixed all of their problems that they were suffering with as far as the LPL season, not just in their play style and generally how they're moving around the map, but even in their champion picks, the fact that they were able to utilize the Callista well and they had to be banned against them or picked away from them in the Snake series just because of its success in the OMG series. LGD won these games, and this is what I'm talking. LGD won these games because they played perfectly. They played as the better team, not because Snake made more mistakes. I mean, you have to think pretty much I think in every single game, 17 minutes, 15 minutes in, things were pretty much even if LGD were at like a slight goal deficit just because the lane swap, that there wasn't a ton of early pressure and early kills. It was just that one initial team fight at around the 15 to 20 minute mark that LGD just snowballed and threw everything ahead. And it consistently happened every single time. And again, we go back to attributing that, hey, Snake, what are they going to do? They're going to 5v5 team fight. Why? Because that's all that they've been able to show in the regular season. So what did LGD do? They picked AoE stacking wombo combo compositions. And they were like, hey, we know you're going to fight us. And then just dumpstered them. So it was very excellent to watch a team just get that outmaneuvered and that outsmarted.
So as you go now towards the final, do you have a gut feeling as to where this should end up?
I still want to say EDG just because consistently EDG have performed better and they've shown a higher ceiling even in EDG or in LGD's like flawless playoff run. That said, it needs to be noted that EDG are slumping. They're not playing to their potential and their ceiling right now, and LGD very clearly are. And they've done it back-to-back in 2 series. Of course, their opponents in EDG are going to be far superior than Snake and OMG, but...
If EDG is to win, what are the win conditions of their team? Like, which players should do what, and what would a win from EDG look like in a series with LGD, do you think?
Clearlev needs to be playing to his ceiling. He can't slack off even though he's facing down against Twin, just because Twin is protected by the meta and protected by the lane swap and what LGD are setting up stylistically. Pawn needs to show up against Wayless. He has to put Wayless down. And I actually think more hinges, and it's weird too because we're going into the EDG versus LGD matchup. This is Pawn or Deft versus Imp. Like, this is a crazy hype game of these 2 AD carries, and we're not going to be at a situation anymore where it's Mata versus Heart. I mean, you have 2 really good supports, Mako and PYL, and they're very similar in what they do as far as like their roam and how they impact the map, and even a little bit overlapping on their champion pools. Although I think Mako's a bit more reserved, a bit more defensive, but. I mean, it's not going to be a total mismatch as far as the supports and Mata just hands down winning the lane 2v1ing. And of course, like, Imp was an amazing player. He always has been. Now he's really proven that he doesn't need Mata. But to be frank, Manta could have 2v1'd Heart and Deft and did so before, and now that's a factor that's taken out. So that's really exciting to see that isolated matchup. But I think it's more weighed so on stopping Wayless and Pawn showing up in that mid lane.
Because that's the thing. If you look at these two teams position-wise, okay, you can make interesting arguments for almost all the positions on the map. But now, oh, look at this. What's the one glaring hole in LGD? Well, all these arguments, it turns out, were just a build-up, set up to the ultimate experimental laboratory setting for Froskurinn, which is what you need to do is get a team who really can match up at every position with EDG. Wow, we've managed to do it. We've got one. Except one position, jungler.
Yep.
Therefore, if the other team had a really strong jungler, in any sense, team fighting late in the game, whatever he might be able to do as a jungler, this would be his time to shine and really show, like, look how much better I am than this other guy, look how much more I can do for my team. If it gets to the late game, I'm an actual team fighter, whereas this guy's just playing whatever tanks and shit. So this is Clearlove's time to dominate and earn that 14th spot on Froskurinn's top 20 players of all time list that will never be forgotten and will always be referenced on every single show forever.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, the meta does protect Chwin, but it is up to Clearlove. I think it is really going to come down to the 2v2 between mid jungle or jungle top. Right now, LGD have been running more so like roaming with Acorn or Flame and Chwin and doing their thing versus Wayless roaming around with Chwin. So I almost think that it's going to be Koro versus whatever top laner they run, and Clearlove versus Chwin. So I think that's fairly interesting. And to be frank, Koro has also been slumping. He's not like his big carry form that he showed at the very beginning of the series. He's fallen back on more of the utility bruiser, and that is where his comfort zone is. But facing down someone like Acorn, someone like Flame, like you're facing the quintessential, the carry top laner and the AoE bruiser top laner. So this will be a really interesting test, and I think the top side of the map is actually in LGD's favor.
So one of the problems with LGD so far not losing a single game is that we still don't have any kind of a bead on what their plan is in terms of whether they use Flame or whether they use Acorn. Like, for example, we don't know. Let's say they'd won the first game in each of their other series, but then they'd lost the second game. Would they have immediately taken Acorn out, like if it had been his performance? If Acorn had performed well but they'd lost, would they have kept Acorn in, like he's the main player and they want to stick with their best lineup to have the best chance of winning? Instead, because it was always the third game and they were always 2-0 up, people have even speculated, oh, they just put Flame in as like BM, you know, like they put him in as, oh, like, well, you know, we can afford to waste a game, and if we win with him anyway, like it's you know, it's like styling on the opponents, you know. Now, to give an actual analytical basis, there's also the fact that it's also like a luxury to have, as in once you're already 2-0 up, if you then put in a player who the opponent hasn't played yet and actually might even be able to play some slightly different champions, you also then make it even more difficult for them because they're having to adapt to you even more so perhaps. So there's that wrinkle as well. But the reason why I ask this is because going into a final, where in theory, no matter what's happened in any of the rest of the season, the final matters. Like, winning this final is really important, especially for a team like LGD who's never even been in a final of an LPL. I'm sure to their organization it's huge to win. Do you think Flame will appear in the series in the final? Do you think they just stick with Acorn, they go with the safe approach, and they go with what in general they've been doing for the most of the season, has been playing Acorn?
No, I think they'll show Flame. I think that they'll still only show him on the back half. What I would actually be really curious of is, I think for sure they'll show him on the third game. Actually, this is hard to say just because of what it's actually going to turn down to as far as score.
Yeah, the question is, would they do it if they're down 0-2?
I think they would. So my understanding and what I had heard is that they were actually starting to swing more towards Flame, which I thought was weird because they weren't showing it as far as their setup of subbing him in. But there's also more prep time between the quarters and the semis to the finals. Like, we have a whole week of prep time now versus just a day. So like there's just that much more opportunity to work with Flame, like knowing who their opponent is for sure now that it's EDG, and setting up and taking time to create strategies of, like you said, utilizing different champion picks because they have two different styles of top laner.
Because the other thing that's a bit strange about how they've used the two players is that, to a degree, it feels like they really have used Flame almost as like a motivational tool for Acorn, because some of the times when they would put him in that second game was particularly if Acorn either did really badly, it was like almost certain Flame was coming out second, or if Acorn just did like mediocre, you know, maybe in a matchup he should have won, or he should. That's when they would nearly always bring Flame out. Whereas if Acorn just completely dunked the first game, then that's when you would sometimes see 2 games in a row from Acorn in the regular split. So I wonder in that sense in the final if that will continue. Like for example, if it's just a way, because they have the luxury of having a top lane like that, if they just use it as like a way, like a panic button, like okay, Acorn did badly, right, get him out for this game, put him in, or whether they actually will use it as a strategical tool. Like to me, the more interesting thing isn't what they'll do if they're 2-0 up or 0-2 down. Like I said, it's what they do if they're 1-1. Like let's say they win the first game. Well, no, try the other way around. Let's say they lost the first game. Do they keep Acorn in even from the first into the second? And if they do and they win the second game, well, now surely you don't take him out and then go to an unknown. So that's where it would be interesting in terms of the call, because actually that's the sort of scenario where if you then lost the final and at any point in time you bring Flame in and either he does badly or it just threw your team off, that's the sort of thing where, like, we've never had anything like that in League of Legends before. There's never been a time where there was literally a sub call in that could be considered like the play that was cost you the final, you know. I can't think of that in history.
I mean, the obvious answer would be that you should always play towards the composition that you have set up or what you're planning to run or what's coming. It's even hard, too, because in draft phase, that can really throw you off if you haven't projected everything perfectly. So, but I mean, like, the obvious answer would be don't blame the player for the poor performance. Like, if you're going to bring in Flame, then you do a composition that Flame suits better with his skill set. And then at that point, you look at the composition and say, okay, this comp just didn't work for the scenario via something that happened at the draft phase or the team's inability to execute, as opposed to pointing at Acorn or pointing at Flame and being like, this is your fault because it threw off the team or you had a bad performance.
That's
I think
what's
would be the
strange,
most mature
though.
way to look at it.
Is that approach is like the obvious like analytical metagame approach. Like, okay, well, if you have these two players, regardless of who's your main starter, like at the moment, it's pretty obvious Acorn's the main starter. Mm-hmm. If you do use the other one, then you're going to use him for his strengths and because he's a different type of player to give you a different look. But they don't actually do that. That's not the way they've used Flame. In fact, what's interesting is they initially did give Flame some of his carry champions, but now he is on like a permanent diet of champions he didn't play before. Like he had to learn Rumble, that became his main pick. Now they've got one Gnar, which he wasn't playing at all at the beginning of the split. And what's interesting is, to a degree, it's actually worked in the sense that he's actually now developed into being able to play those champions. And so his Rumble actually got pretty decent in some games. And recently, obviously in the playoffs, the 2 Gnar games have been really good, actually. Yeah. And yet he's not even playing... Here's the thing. When you play Gnar, it's not like you have to go only tank. But he's playing it pure tank. Like 100% defensive items, no offensive stats at all. Well, I mean, technically, fucking Sunfire Cape does like magic damage when you know, but that doesn't really count for Froskurinn, you know.
What's actually really interesting for me as far as the differences between Acorn and Flame, even you get like more of a side-by-side comparison of their playstyle just because they are playing the same champion pool. And what I actually really like watching as far as Flame's playstyle on Gnar is, yeah, he's more of a tanky-based Gnar, but he still plays his lane hyper-aggressive. And that is one of the tools to Gnar, kind of why we've seen the resurgence of him, is because Shyvana and Hecarim are really big picks, and Gnar works really well against those picks because he's able to walk them down with if he wants to do Frozen Mallet itemization, or just the fact that he's abusing his boomerang range on, you know, melee-based targets. But what Flame always does is he gets his lead as far as like pressure, and he sends the enemy top laner back, and he will consistently, out of the few games that he's played, get a TP advantage without any sort of jungle intervention. And then he immediately, like, think about all the times that Flame has gotten kills on a teleport that's well-timed. Well, this is all set up by him. Like, the fact that he forces in the 1v1 the outplay to get the TP advantage, and then he transitions it into finding kills later down. So people will say, well, he got those kills off the TP, he didn't kill his top laner. But he applied the correct amount of pressure in the 1v1 to make sure that that play was available for his team, and he executes it pretty much every single time, no matter what champion he's on. Not just Gnar, but he's done it on Rumble many times as well. Whereas Acorn's more about wave management, and he's more about roaming. Like, he's gotten to play more Hecarim, so that's an issue, is that champion pool. Flame hasn't got to play nearly as much Hecarim, but Acorn's much more about roaming with the jungler, and he gets a lot more jungle presence. Like, he'll still make those teleport plays, but it's not in the same way that Flame is making it. So I do think that it is an issue that they're not playing to Flame's champion pool, or being very specific as far as the tools and how they're rearranging compositions between the two players, but there is a big difference in how even those two players are playing those picks that they're given.
That's also the strange thing, and that really has become the pattern, because that's the thing. until the playoffs, you always could at least use the excuse of like, oh, they're experimenting, or maybe they don't care about these games. But they literally have actually gone the other way with Acorn. Now he's the one who plays all the carry champions. You know, before he was playing Kennen and these different champions like that. Well, now in the playoffs, he's maining Hecarim. Like, he's the one who's playing that all the time. Whereas you'd think that's the champion where if you want someone to just bully out the lane and win fights later on, well, you'd give that over to Flame. But actually, it's almost like they've pushed the two players out of their comfort zones. But actually, I have to give props to both players. They've both actually been really solid. Initially, they might have had the occasional problem, but they've now gotten quite good on those ones, to the extent that if you just look at them only as that type of a player now, they're both doing pretty well in LPL.
Yeah, no, I agree. Acorn has put up fantastic numbers on Hecarim. He has shown to be like a carry threat, and likewise, Flame can play things like Lissandra and Rumble and Gnar, and he can do it really well. I will say this though, like, because Acorn plays the first part of the series, typically, like, I think 100% of the time, I don't think there's ever been a time where Flame was started. It's much easier to get Hecarim in the first game, especially from blue side, because he's first pick worthy, versus when Flame is able to come in and that champion's been banned away because, you know, they got it the first time, so they're never going to let it happen again. So I think that is an issue that when Flame comes in, it's just not possible to get that pick.
What are the win conditions for LGD, specifically against EDG?
Protect Chwin and put Wayless down. And then all Imp has to do is he just needs to go even at lane. Like, obviously, he has the potential.
You
like,
mean
just
put Pawn down?
Yeah. No, for LGD to win? Yeah, sorry. Put Pawn down. And then beat Clear. Like, if you can stall out Pawn and Clearlove, I think that's a major issue, just because Pawn and Clearlove are going to be involved in the majority of the early game as far as EDG are considered. So there's like a bunch of free gold that you're able to snowball off of. But the problem is that LGD have never been known for their early game. So that's kind of the sketch factor. Imp just needs to go even in his lane because he's still phenomenal. Like, obviously, Deft is the epitome of the team fight, but the compositions that LGD are running as far as taking a massive AoE, the fact that they're able to put Imp on Callista or on Graves and have like that big burst damage or like the sustained Rin damage across every single teammate, he doesn't need to be super far ahead. He just needs to stay even and do his thing.
Another scenario here in this particular final of a chance where the stage is set for someone to shine and really prove that they're worth the plaudits that they're given, perhaps unduly at times, is Pawn, world champion mid laner, has had an awesome season. He's even had a wonderful playoffs. So now Wayless, aka GodV, this is his time to shine. He can be the guy who shuts Pawn down, outplays Pawn, gets the better of him in matchups. This is his time to show, like, I'm the best Chinese AD mid laner, right? You think it can happen, don't you? You think it can happen.
Okay, so here's the thing. No one will beat Pawn in a 1v1. I think the only person who will beat Pawn in a 1v1 consistently or stand toe-to-toe with him is Cool, but Cool's been, like, throwing himself away on just dumb picks. But, like, in an even matchup or even counter matchup, like, I think Cool's really the only mid laner that can stand to Pawn's mechanics, other than maybe Rookie, although that didn't work out very well, but Rookie got counter-picked a lot.
Well, you have to realize, by the way, when you say stupid picks, that's just because what Cool was doing by picking, like, the Lulu, etc., was he was essentially acknowledging, like, I can't stand before the God Wayless, like, God
I just
V.
have to...
You know, it's like that Game of Thrones bit where the Mance Rayder is, like, coming before Stannis, and it's like, you know, it's customary to kneel when surrendering to a king. That's what God V basically said to Cool, and then Cool was like, yes, my lord, yes, my liege, and he did kneel. He picked the Lulu like a little bitch, and he got ready to pop that Winsy on himself and get the fuck out of that lane. Yeah, that's all that needs to be said.
But Wayless...
Okay. Anyway, back in reality, okay, yeah.
Wayless is so smart. He's probably the smartest mid laner in LPL. I think the game that really captures this, go to the Snake game and watch when Wayless gets casted in, and just watch how he positions for the first team fight. And this is the big swing, like I said, because versus Snake versus LGD, it's fairly even for the first 17 minutes or so, and then there's that big dragon fight. But that big dragon fight goes the way it does because Wayless is so good at playing from blue side on dragons. He'll always go to the back of the pit and just fearlessly initiate a fight or come in on his like really fragile assassins. He'll do this with Ahri. He does it with Kassadin. He'll go through the back of the pit and just like time it perfectly to come in from a side flank as opposed to positioning behind his team and trying to go front to back. Like, Wayless is so smart about team fights. His Orianna is incredible. It's very different how he plays Orianna. So he won't beat Pawn 1v1, but he could do better than Pawn in a team fight, especially if they go even. If both teams kind of waste away their early game and it comes to that big dragon fight, there is a 50-50 chance that LGD can take that away from EDG if they're not able to get their skirmish snowball on.
Here's the thing, Froskurinn, though. When you described EDG before, why they're so unbeatable. So if you try and catch them in the jungle, okay, then you're going to run into
20 other
Mako,
people.
Clearlove, Koro, whoever. They're all going to be there, okay. So in this particular world, haven't we got the ideal team to battle that? Because we've got the mid laner. Wayless is going to be putting vision all around the map. We've got PYL is a better version of Mako, remember? He loves to roam around the map. Then we've got, in theory, the top laner, if it's Acorn, he's a roamer. So we've got 3 roamers here. Or we've got this Nunu that isn't just going to be bullied 1-on-1. So we've got the right team to catch them out and to punish that, right?
I mean, I think that LGD do have a lot of things that work inherently for them against EDG, but it hasn't paid off in the normal LPL season. Again, LGD is playing at a new ceiling as far as their skill is concerned. If LGD can get away from EDG's early roam snowball of avoiding those skirmishes or at least meeting them and go into a 5v5, I think they do better as far as vision control and wave management than EDG do, at least right now for the playoffs they have. And that's the big turn. Because team fighting EDG is still relatively terrifying just because Deft is so good at it, but LGD are supplementing their weaknesses and compensating for that with their compositions that they picked and they showed against OMG and Snake. Like I said, the AoE, because that's so easy to run. Like, what's going to be harder? Deft having his amazing, fantastic performance on Jinx, where he's fine-tuning that finesse. If I can go in here, I have to back up here. I'm micromanaging my cooldowns, micromanaging my enemy cooldowns. Or Imp just running into a team fight as big, beefy Graves and just immediately blowing his collateral damage across someone's face. Like, Imp is a good player, but it's far easier.
See how well we're matched here with our metaphors for Froskurinn.
Yeah, mine got a little bad on the back half of that.
Yeah,
I wasn't doing rim shots, that's for sure.
That wasn't intentional. Okay, I see. So, in this particular,
it's just really exciting for me because I love EDG.
It's just really exciting for you for a big beefy guy to go in there and blow his
collateral damage all
over someone's face. Okay,
all over someone's face.
Oh, understandable. You're only human, so
I want to set up the scenario for LGD to win because I think that would be a really exciting series to watch. Like, I want a really good series because, frankly, I feel like I haven't really had one. I liked LGD versus Snake series probably the best, and I would love like a close, like just both teams playing at the height of their capabilities. I think that LGD is playing better there, but if EDG play to their height of their ceiling, they should win this game fairly easily. If they don't, then I really want to put up a scenario where LGD could win and finally take it. Because it's such a great story. Like, Imp beating Deft, like, that would already be amazing. LGD finally winning an LPL title. PYL finally winning an LPL title. That's amazing on its own for how close that guy has gotten and for how good he's been for so long to finally be recognized as far as an achievement.
What are the odds? Like, what percentage win chance does EDG have?
I want to say it's close. I would say like a 40-60. 40 to LGD.
That close? So if they play 10 times, EDG only win 6 of them?
I think it's actually that close, yeah. I think LGD have finally... We always talked about how they were the perfect marriage of strategy and mechanics, and that's really what's put EDG head and shoulders above every other person. And LGD is one of the few teams that across the lineup, they are either even or better, like superior individually, and the only weakness has been their jungler, and they've shown that they can shore up that weakness either through their playstyle or through their picks.
Yeah, it's funny how that opinion develops as results come in. Like, suddenly every position they're so strong at. Before it was IG that had all the strong players, and then OMG had all the best players. And as they fall by the wayside, Froskurinn, much like opinions of yesterday, which fleet like last night's makeup, smeared now, partly removed. The lighting is different. Suddenly, we're in a whole new world of reality, cold, hard facts.
Cold hard fact, LGD is playing better in the playoffs than EDG. That's a fact.
Have their opponents been as good, though?
I don't think Vici, or I don't think IG and World Elite were the highest caliber of opponents in their current form.
You don't think IG was better than Snake?
Probably slightly. I'm really hard on IG right now because I was not impressed with the shit that they were pulling.
Well, here's the thing, Froskurinn. We're going to get a chance to find out if that particular statement's correct, because Snake will be playing against IG in the third place game. Who will win this matchup?
Because we all care about who comes in third and fourth.
Don't say that as like... By the way, I don't care, and I also think those matches that fucking suck, and in general players don't care as much. But ignoring that, don't say that as like an excuse for if Snake beat IG.
No, IG's gonna win.
Like, if Snake beat IG and Flandra puts Zitai in the fucking dumpster, then you can't just use that as an excuse.
I would be shocked if Snake beat Invictus Gaming. Yep.
Okay. Who is the biggest wild card? The one player in the final on either team you can pick who could, if he has like if his performance is better than ever before, just win the whole series for his team or turn the series for his team. Is the one player out of the 10 who particularly can just win it just if he's better than we've seen before? Like the breakout performance. Who could be that?
This is gonna sound okay. So I have two for this one. Obviously, the initial person that I want to talk about is Chwin. If Chwin plays better than he's ever played before, then LGD should win this fairly easily because they've been the smartest team in LPL for, other than EDG, for a very long time.
Wait a minute. What do you mean fairly easily? What do you mean they've been the smartest team all of a sudden? You're the one who's made a Lord bet with me that fucking EDG is going to win the MSI.
Because EDG looked amazing in everything that they were doing, but now they're starting to fumble right before the fucking finish line, which is awful. Okay. But LGD, not even just this split, not just with their Koreans and their new acquisitions, but for a very long time, LGD have been the smart team, where they were weaker mechanically, they had weaker players, but they were able to outmaneuver and beat superior teams just because of cleaner rotations, of better strategy, a better draft phase. And a lot of that goes to PYL and how controlling he is as a shot caller. To my understanding, he's similar to, like, somewhere between Reaper and Mata about, like, how he controls his team and everything that goes on. So big props to that guy. But now they have, like, they don't have to worry about the fact that they've got shitter players in their solo lanes. Now they have these all-stars. So
of the two teams, EDG and LGD, just from what you've seen in the playoffs and the regular split, who do you think is the better at the pick and ban draft phase? Like, who has the better strategy or better understanding of how to get what they want? Who do you think has the edge there?
I want to give it to Aaron, just because I trust him as a coach, and I think EDG have done some fairly smart things, but yeah, I'll give it to Aaron.
In terms of the champion pools of both of the teams, does LGD have the same depth, man for man, as the EDG team does?
Not in jungle. Nunu's going to be a big priority contested pick.
So if EDG wins, who is the MVP of EDG for this final?
I would say Deft.
He has to carry, and then they win the game.
Yeah, and that's been Deft's role. A lot of people will give it to Pawn because it's almost like a baton race. I think I've used this example before, where it'll be Pawn in the early game, and then he'll hand it off either to Clearlove or Koro, and they'll kind of carry like the mid game or the initial dragon fights or dragon control, objective control, and then late game they just throw it to Deft.
Okay, then on LGD side, who would be the MVP if they win, do you think?
Probably Imp or Wayless. Maybe, this is hard. Like, I feel like LGD is more set up to be a triple threat team right now just because Koro is faltering a bit. And I feel like Acorn and Flame are scarier than Koro is right now. So that's kind of the issues. You have like you have all three members across every single lane of LGD that can just turn into utter monsters. I'll say Imp, because Imp's been consistently just like putting out amazing numbers and just doing really well. And I do think that Wayless and Acorn and Flame and like what they're doing for Imp, and Imp's just, being that AD carry and right-clicking, but he's still making some fantastic plays and great team fight positioning, and, being able to play Callista now, the fact that it has to be picked or banned away from them is pretty strong.
Like, all season long, I've thought LGD, in terms of just pure roster, they had so much talent on the lineup that they always should have been this good. I always felt like they always, like, for me, because I thought OMG also should, they're a team you can say the same thing about. You look at all the talent, you're like, they should be really good. To me, it always should have been the case that in an ideal world where everyone played out their actual level of play that they're capable of, this league should have been first place EDG, second place OMG, third place LGD. That should have been the story of the whole regular split. There should have been almost no one could really match them, because in terms of playing so many games, those should have been the three clear-cut teams. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it didn't play out like that. So to me, it's not like some massive shock that LGD can be very good. But I still have to say that EDG, I think, will win, because just the way they played overall, if this is them when they're slumping, then they're still a really fucking good team. I mean, there's 3-0'd IG. Even though they lost those games in the first round, yet again, that was with the fucking sub playing. I mean, they won 2 games with a sub playing. That's fucking pretty impressive right there. So I still think you have to favour it to EDG. To me, the big X factor on either team is actually going to be Pawn. Because every other position, I think, has some wiggle room. But if Pawn plays really well, I think he's just going to win the whole game for them, because I'm pretty certain both AD carries on both teams are going to play well to their natural strengths. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Deft will just output damage really well, and he'll play smart. I think Imp will play aggressively and try and go ham in fights. I think both of them, I know what I'm going to get from them. Top laners on both teams, pretty set story, I think. It's the mid lane, to me, that's the biggest matchup, because it's not that Schwen's been playing awesome in their wins. He actually hasn't had to do much. It's just that he hasn't been exposed, he hasn't been killed a lot, he's never really been put under pressure, so I'm not that worried about what happens there. It's more, to me, if Pawn can really dominate Wayless, or he can solo kill him, or he can just in terms of champion pool, like, force Wayless not to play champions that Wayless wants to play. Like, you're talking about Wayless playing Kassadin. Well, I don't know, unless you're going to first pick it, if you can even leave Kassadin up in a world where Pawn can just pick it and fuck you up, So that's, to me, the big X factor is what will Pawn do in the series. And that's why I'm going to edge it towards EDG, because I think even if he doesn't play awesome, they can win. But if he does, I think that puts them over the top.
No, I think that's actually a really fair assessment, especially for how quickly those teams can both snowball off of their mid lane pressure. And EDG have already been super refined and practiced at it.
Also, let me just think.
I would love to see Pawn play against Wayless's Orianna. I think that would be a really exciting game, actually, in as far as team fights.
This also means in LPL that we've had... people always make the comment about OGN. One of the astounding things about OGN was that in something like... Let me think how many it was. I think there was 8 seasons of OGN... And in 8 seasons, there was 7 different winners, because only one team ever went back-to-back SKT. So that's like an astounding, in terms of like the turnover of top teams and like people adapting to whatever the dominant team was. Mm-hmm. Well, in LPL, okay, yes, it looks not that great, because the last 4 LPLs, the last 3 rather, was just won by whoever Name played for. There was Positive Energy 1-1, then EDG 1-2. Mm-hmm. But actually, in terms of diversity in the final, it's been pretty good, because we've had... Well, there was Positive Energy played OMG in the one that they won there. Then there was IG played against EDG. And then the last one, finally, we actually got the OMG versus EDG. Finally, that matchup happened. So this time it's going to be EDG versus LGD. So we've got another matchup, another new matchup in theory. So the potential is there for the upset. Will it happen this time, though? Ignoring analysis... because I think actually analysis of who on paper should win and who your analysis tells you to win, sometimes you do have a gut feeling like I think this is going to happen. Do you think the upset will actually happen, if you had to say in that sense?
I think that this is LGD's best chance to ever win an LPL title in their career, which is a fairly obvious and easy thing to say because of their Korean acquisitions.
I mean, obviously not accurate, because the best chance is if they're like, the salary, we're spending a lot of money on salary, so if we just send that Acorn guy back to Korea, then then they'd have a better chance for scoring. So I'll correct you there, but technically, from what you know now, without being able to speculate, yeah, you're right. Right now, it's the best chance.
They've consistently been a top-tier team with really limited resources comparatively to these other clubs, so it's nice to see this finally happen for them. That said, my gut still tells me that EDG is going to win just because they've been so oppressive for so long, and I think out of all of the hybrid rosters, EDG looked... I mean, other than LGD, like the thing is that's cool because it's the two hybrid rosters that have probably done the best with their Korean acquisitions.
If LGD won, though, would that change up anything about how you think of the MSI? Like, if LGD's going, you remember our Lord bet was that you thought EDG would beat GE Tigers? Is LGD going to beat whoever comes out of Korea if they go?
I think it's still a really fair matchup, just because I think EDG and LGD are the smartest Chinese teams. And
now that changes as it goes on, yeah.
The big
so VG was the smartest, then IG was the smartest. Suddenly LGD and smart. Everyone's just the smartest, aren't they?
Everyone's just the smartest. VG was so smart at what they did, Thorin, and I'm so you don't know how bad that.
All it takes for you to think someone's really smart for scoring is they just have to perform really well when you're watching. That's why you consider me the smartest in the esports industry. From all these episodes,
They just shit the bed so hard. I love it. Okay, I love when teams do a really unique strategy, like Starhorde with Insec and Uzi. Even though I dislike Uzi and I never thought that he was amazing, I still love the fact that they just have that one thing and they just do it so well that you just can't counter it, or you're forced to play almost this counter style to it that you're not comfortable on, and so they're just able to like edge you out, or like OMG style with their triple threat or their triangle in the top lane and their dive, and Vici with their rotation-based style and how they played with vision. Like, I love that shit. Like, you
just love that forced edging. It's the finish is always worthwhile.
Oh my goodness, yes. So I still think EDG is gonna win. I'm really disappointed in Invictus Gaming. I still love them. I would if LGD or EDG go to MSI, I still think that China has the edge. I'm really impressed with LGD's playoff run. I wasn't impressed with them as much in the LPL season, but at least as far as back-to-back with their two series, the EDG series, even if they lose, will really be the tell of if this is a trend to stay for LGD and if this is a consistent thing from them, or if it was just those two series because they faced weaker teams.
Okay, ignoring the playoffs for a minute, we actually have to talk about the promotion tournament thingamajigger bob that no one even knows goes on, because we live in a world, Froskurinn. If you thought, I've already been, like, if I was some sort of crap LCS producer, I'd have already created my own hashtag Darkest Timeline League of Legends Season 5. So I'd have already had my own hashtag. And as the season's been going on, I've been citing all the different horrible things, this player leaves, and this player, like, Froggen gets a shit team, and then, everything that goes downhill. As if I thought it had gone as far as it could go. Like, for example, TSM wins IEM, it's getting as bad as it can get, but I still didn't know there was levels to this shit that could go lower. And it turns out that Name and Insec have been relegated out of LPL.
Yep. And Zero, too. Don't forget Zero.
Yeah, he's not like an all-time great player, though.
Yeah,
he's a good player now, but I mean, we're talking about legendary players,
Yep.
Icons of the positions.
Yep.
And they're not even in LPL. A league which they're not in anymore because fucking GamT beat them up with ease. So explain that to me.
Okay. First and foremost, people want to take this and they want to tear Name down, and of course I think it's almost like my Crystal thing. Like, people say, like, oh, she loves this guy so much and we hate her so much, so we need to hate him and pull him down. Okay, just because Worlds is the only tournament that you ever watch Name in doesn't mean that you know shit about him. This guy is fucking amazing, and yeah, this season wasn't his best season, but you have to think of all of the variables and the factors that came to Name getting relegated. Like, first and foremost, he's not able to play for half the season. Why did that happen? Because Starhorn Royal Cup's manager disliked Name. He didn't really want him. He was actually thinking about selling the team, and so when the transfer came through where he pushes Uzi out, he waits until the very last second to sign a new AD carry, which happens to be Name. And he dragged his ass on it because he didn't want Name. Not, and you could say like this is evidence of, oh, he didn't want Name because he's an overrated player, he's bad. He just doesn't like the guy. The guy was thinking about selling the club, so whatever. He got fucked over by a manager. He's only able to play with his own team for, I think, 4 weeks. I think he joined in week 8 and week 11. So what, that's 3 weeks? That's 3 weeks where they have their entire roster. And they don't even get their entire roster because after Name joins, like literally a week, maybe 2 weeks after Name's finally on the roster playing with them in LPL, Insec jumps out a fucking window. Like, all of these things have to line up for Name to get relegated, and includes someone jumping out of a window and breaking their leg. Like, how crazy is that?
Sure.
So just, people want to shit on Name because he got relegated. Name didn't have the greatest season. There were a ton of factors that went into this, so
like,
whatever.
one of the biggest factors to me is the fact that, listen, let's not make any bones about it, he also didn't play very well in the games he did play. But that's also not entirely the most damning factor, because it's true, and you can't give him any points for playing, but the difference is, remember, everyone else in theory who was a full-time starter got to play 44 regular season games. So they all had time with their brand new lineups. Remember, everyone in the league almost had in fact, every team in the league had a brand new lineup as far as I know. Every single team got to adjust, got to gel, got to try new things, got to like test this out. Whereas when they came in the team in Star Royal Club, they instantly were already having to battle to get into the playoffs and play all the time. Every other team has an advantage of playing together more in the season. It's like every possible disadvantage was against them, you know. And so in that particular sense, yeah, it's hard to judge it. You can't really take any absolute conclusions away from it, aside from he didn't play very well in the games and the team clearly did not gel together very well. Like, actually, amazingly, as a team, they didn't do as well as that early period. But again, I also think that's an unfair analysis because, again, when they did their best with the fucking sub who wasn't even AD carry, again, that was when the other teams were still getting their shit together and a lot of them didn't understand how they were going to play. So it's not a Keep Keith type scenario where if they'd have kept the guy who wasn't even an AD carry, they'd have somehow made the playoffs. Like, come on, you have to go be realistic about this stuff.
No, I agree. I actually think that this will probably be better for Insec and Name's career.
Do you think this just means that they leave Star Royal Club and go to LPL teams again?
Oh, I know for sure that. I mean, think about the reputation that Name already had with the Starhorn Royal Club brand as far as like the manager. I can't say for certain because I don't know if that guy is going to sell the team, but the fact that he wanted to sell the team before LPL even started, I can only imagine now that he's just ready to get rid of that thing. And so hopefully Insec, Name, Zero, even Corn and Cola will find homes on better teams, especially because they now have an LPL track record. And you have 2 new LSPL teams joining, VT Point, and I can never say the other team's names. I'm just going to call them QG. That's their tag. So, I mean, 9 times out of 10, LSPL rosters, they join LPL, and now they have more money, more sway, and they're able to sign LPL stars, and you have some pretty big names that have just been released onto the marketplace. I think King was the only, because last year LSPL, King was the only LSPL team that didn't change the roster. Of course, Snake upgraded, got Beast and Ella.
So what are the odds though that they actually go to LPL again? Is it more likely they just go to another LPSL team?
I would think that it's slimmer that they go into the LPL, although I feel like Masters 3 is looking to replace their AD carry.
That would be the dream right there, right?
It would be the dream. Dade and Name on the same roster.
What, you forgot about Looper?
Listen,
I gotta inform you, there's a young man called Theon who's trying to make his name in the game. You know, he's very much sort of like the crystal of writing, you know. He's very, very hyped. People really be enjoying his regular split performances. And he actually wrote an article in which he dubbed Looper the genius of the top lane and explained about how Looper was better on Jax than Shy, on Save, on Shyvana. He had a better win rate than Flames. So listen, don't forget an all-time great player like Looper, you know. Let
me give you one better. Can you imagine this? World Elite. They pick up Cola for top lane. They kick Aluka. They keep Spirit. They keep Shie. They pick up Name.
That's the part I don't think they're going to do, though.
That would make too much sense.
Because first of all, they've got a Korean, and so we all know Chinese teams are like, oh my god, I got to Korea. This is amazing. Korea is better than anything. And they'll put any Korean on there. It doesn't even have to be an established one. It can just be a Korean. It's like, I think to some teams, obviously if you get a star Korean, everyone understands the value in that. But I think if you can't afford a star Korean, just having any Korean's worth it. It's like putting a spoiler on like an average car, you know. Yeah, you'd rather have a spoiler that's on like a Lamborghini or some shit. But just put a spoiler on like a
The Ford Focus.
Yeah, Ford Focus. It'll still look good, won't you? Maybe you'll still get some dumb girl who's in high school who thinks that shit's cool, you know, to come and drink some wine coolers with you at the kegger. That's what getting Mythic and Ninja and all those other fools is about. So I don't even know if they would kick and get Name. I hope they would, but who can know at this point?
Can you imagine how good that would be? Dreams.
Although,
I would love to have Dade and Name on the
when
same
you
team.
when you said that they pick up Cola, okay, I understand that. But you know the player I actually think more than Name, the player who's been most punished by this season for Starhorn Royal Club
is Zero?
Is Corn.
Oh, Corn, really?
Everyone thinks he's dog shit now.
He's not dog shit. He's serviceable. I don't think he's a top end mid laner.
He's the guy where if I had to guess, I'd say he's just going to disappear into the night and never be seen again. Yeah. It's over for him.
That may actually happen. It's pretty unfortunate because Corn's not awful. He's not amazing. Serviceable, does his job. He has stage fright issues. That's a big problem.
Oh boy, stage fright issues.
Oh,
Love
boy.
those. Love those. That's why he literally was. That's why the joke about Corn obviously was that
the youngest player in the world championship. I can tell you that. Corn.
That the players who get stage fright, you know my thing that I always mention is that they always just like the panic. Is you just say, oh, I'll just pick Orianna, like I'll be safe. Well, he literally was told to pick Orianna, so that's like what masked the fact that he was shitting himself because he was actively told by the coach. He was like, oh yeah, sure, coach, I'll pick that. I'll do whatever you say. Whew, thank God. It's like wiping sweat off his forehead.
That's the other kind of tragic story about Starhorn Royal Club being relegated is that their coach, Chris, stepped down. And if you guys haven't heard about Chris is the only League of Legends coach to go to 2 World Finals back-to-back. So not saying it was all him, but he was the coach on the Starhorn Royal Club team.
Yeah, and I also saw the way he coached them throughout those regular splits. Hell of a guy.
He
Hell of a
jumped
guy.
out a window.
Yeah,
you're talking about Uzi
right.
flashing into team fights.
Okay, I think this show's pretty much died. So,
Yeah, I think you killed it.
I think you killed it talking about Uzi insect flashing into team fights or something. Everyone's like, what? Okay.
What? Hello? I had a guy the other day on Twitter.
Is this ended yet, by the way? I haven't pressed the stop recording.